Ukraine sends 30 jets toward Russia's nuclear giant. What happened shocked Moscow. 4:03 a.m., November 11, 2025. A freezing silence hung over eastern Ukraine. The kind of silence that comes just before something terrible tears the world open. And in the span of 7 uninterrupted minutes, the sky turned white. Russia had launched a barrage unlike anything seen in months. 42 Kalibr-M cruise missiles and 108 Shahed-type drones streaked across the border, moving so low that some barely cleared treetops. A combined strike package worth over $190 million. Their targets were clear: Kharkiv, Poltava, and Zaporizhzhia, cities sheltering nearly 5.8 million civilians. Moscow called it Operation Northern Torch. Ukraine called it a punishment for refusing to freeze. Within seconds, chaos erupted. Radar screens across multiple Ukrainian air bases lit up with red warning arcs. Commanders scrambled from their bunks. Operators shouted coordinates. Emergency crews sprinted toward underground shelters. It was the largest coordinated midnight assault since the war began. At 4:05 a.m., Ukraine activated every available defense system. S-300, Patriot, and Iris-T batteries launched interceptor missiles that tore upward like silver spears. The first wave knocked down 17 inbound threats. But as more Russian missiles broke through, fireballs erupted across eastern cities. A district hospital in northern Kharkiv lost power within moments. Nurses carried premature infants into reinforced stairwells, using battery-powered heat blankets to keep them alive. A residential block near Poltava collapsed in under 22 seconds, trapping 70 families under concrete. In Zaporizhzhia, a food storage warehouse was turned into a burning crater, its flames rising high enough to be seen from the river. By dawn, 33 civilians were dead, 62 injured, and over 7,400 displaced. The cost of destruction exceeded $350 million. Power grids across 3 regions failed simultaneously, leaving more than 900,000 people in darkness as temperatures dropped below freezing. But while the country mourned, something else stirred beneath the surface. Deep under central Kyiv, in a chamber reinforced with steel and concrete, Ukraine's military leadership gathered around a table illuminated by cold blue screens. Every face showed exhaustion and fury. The attack wasn't random. Intelligence officers confirmed that Russia had struck energy hubs on purpose, hoping the blackout would cripple Ukraine's winter defenses. It didn't work. Instead, it triggered a counterstrike that had been quietly prepared for months, one so ambitious that even NATO analysts doubted Ukraine would ever dare attempt it. At 6:12 a.m., President Volodymyr Zelensky entered the command room. His voice was calm, but every word landed like metal hitting stone. If they target our survival, we will target their certainty. The room fell silent. That sentence marked the birth of Operation Frost Shield, a mission aimed at one of Russia's most guarded assets, a nuclear energy giant deep inside its territory, and 30 Ukrainian pilots had already volunteered for the mission. Stay with me. In the next section, the true scale of the plan becomes clear, and the world sees how far Ukraine is willing to go to end the terror from the sky. By 7 a.m., Ukraine's intelligence chief placed a satellite image on the command room table. A sprawling complex in western Russia, glowing pale blue under thermal scan, the Voronezh Tri-Nuclear Facility, one of the crown jewels of Moscow's energy empire. It powered millions of homes, fed industrial belts, and symbolized Russia's technological pride. Striking it would not trigger a nuclear meltdown, but it would cripple the infrastructure that kept Moscow's western grid alive. For years, analysts called the site untouchable, too deep, too protected, too expensive to risk attacking. But on this morning, after a night of burning cities, no one at the table used the word impossible. Ukraine's generals reviewed the incoming damage reports. A hospital offline, water pumps seized, power stations frozen mid-operation. Russia wanted to force the winter onto Ukrainian civilians. The strategy was clear. If Ukraine did nothing, more nights like this would follow, each one colder than the last. Zelensky listened quietly, hands clasped behind his back. On the central screen, a simulation replayed the Russian strike hour by hour. When it ended, he spoke only one sentence. "Then we strike the hand that flipped the switch." A plan that had been drafted months earlier clicked into motion Operation Frost Shield. The blueprint was bold. 30 F-16 Fighting Falcons, recently certified after months of accelerated training, would carry out the mission, each jet equipped with APG-68 radar, allowing detection of threats from nearly 180 kilometers away. Each armed with AIM-120C missiles, flying at speeds near Mach 4, and behind them the unsung heroes of modern war, 40 UJ, 25 reconnaissance and decoy, UAVs, cheap, expendable, and designed to confuse Russian air defenses long enough for the real strike to slip through. On paper, it sounded elegant. In execution, it bordered on suicidal. Because standing between Ukraine and the target was a defensive wall worth nearly $500 billion, S-400 battalions, Pantsir systems, electronic warfare towers capable of scrambling entire frequency bands, and above it all, the Russian doctrine of layered air defense, built on the assumption that no enemy aircraft would ever dare challenge it directly. But Ukraine had learned something across 2 years of war. Impossible defenses collapse when the attackers stop playing by expected rules. As planners refined the timing, a new concern entered the room. Russia would detect a formation of 30 jets the moment they crossed the border, unless something else appeared bigger, louder, more threatening. That was the decoy swarm's purpose. Each drone would mimic the radar signature of a manned aircraft. If Russia fired its multi-million-dollar missiles at them, the trap would spring. The defense network would thin itself out. The real jets, flying low and fast, could pass through the window of chaos. By 9:30 a.m., the strategy was locked. At noon, the first pilots arrived at the airbase. Most were in their 20s. A few were veterans from the earliest days of the invasion. All of them understood the stakes. If this mission failed, Russia would unleash another night like the last one. If it succeeded, Moscow would feel vulnerability for the first time in years. 2:41 a.m., November 12, 2025. The temperature at Mirhorod Air Base had fallen below freezing. A thin layer of frost covered the runway, cracking under the wheels of ground crews as they moved between fuel lines and weapons carts. No one spoke loudly. No one needed to. Everyone knew this night would be remembered. Under the hangar lights, 30 F-16s stood in a perfect line. Their noses pointed east. Mechanics made final checks on their APG-68 radars. Weapon crews loaded the last AIM-120C missiles. Pilots adjusted oxygen seals and ran through encrypted comms tests with trembling fingers. Even the air felt tight, dense with the weight of what was about to unfold. At 2:58 a.m., the first signal came over comms. A calm, steady voice. Frost Shield Stage 1, commence. From the far end of the runway, the cheap machines moved first. 40 UJ, 25 UAVs, each worth less than the cost of a single Russian interceptor missile, lifted into the sky. They climbed slowly at first, then spread out in a wide formation, mimicking the radar signature of a manned fighter group. Their engines buzzed under the clouds, vanishing into the darkness. 4 minutes later, the real strike package began to move. The first F-16 rolled forward, engines thundering across the frost. Then another, then another. Within moments, all 30 jets were accelerating down the runway, afterburners igniting like rows of blue fire. One by one, they lifted off the ground, banking east at low altitude, hugging the terrain to stay invisible to Russian early warning radars. The mission was now fully alive. At 3:17 a.m., the decoy drones crossed the Russian border. 90 seconds later, Russian radar stations detected what they believed was a massive Ukrainian air formation. Within minutes, alerts flashed across multiple Russian command centers. Operators scrambled. Commanders shouted for confirmations. Air defense crews rushed to their stations. And then, Moscow made its first mistake. Pantsir batteries near the Voronezh facility launched a $9 million volley at drones worth a fraction of that. The sky lit up with white contrails as interceptor missiles shot upward. Russian operators, convinced they were stopping a major incursion, fired again and again. In less than 7 minutes, over $31 million in defense munitions were wasted on decoys. Meanwhile, the real F-16s were slipping through the radar horizon quietly, flying so low that their wingtips nearly touched the treetops. Pilots maintained radio silence, speaking only when necessary. Heart rate stayed steady. Breathing remained controlled. Every movement inside those cockpits was practiced, precise, disciplined. By 3:24 a.m., the trap was working better than analysts predicted. Russian air defenses had split their fire across multiple directions, unsure whether the attack came from the south, the east, or the northeast. Radar screens were cluttered with ghost images. Electronic warfare modules jammed Russian frequencies. The entire system lagged behind the unfolding reality. Inside Ukraine's underground command room, an officer whispered the words every strategist had waited to hear. They've committed. Their shield is open. In the next moment, encrypted orders reached all 30 pilots. Frost Shield, Stage 2, begin the run. What happens next will define the next decade of warfare. 3:29 a.m. The Voronezh Tri-Nuclear Facility glowed faintly under the night sky, its cooling towers releasing thin trails of steam. Inside the control rooms, engineers monitored routine readings, unaware that 30 Ukrainian jets were now less than 3 minutes away. At 3:31 a.m., the first F-16s broke above the tree line, climbing sharply to strike altitude. Their radars locked onto pre-programmed coordinates. Dozens of green indicators flickered across cockpit screens. Every pilot saw the same message. Target range. Confirmed. Seconds later, the first missiles launched. 2, then 4, then a full wave. AIM-120Cs streaked across the sky, each one carving a bright white arc toward the complex Russian radar operators saw the sudden spike of inbound threats and froze. Their defense network, still tangled in decoy signatures, reacted too slowly. 3 missiles hit first, detonating inside the turbine hall. The blast ruptured steel, ignited coolant lines, and sent a fireball nearly a kilometer into the air. 5 more followed, punching through the cooling tower structures and collapsing hundreds of tons of reinforced concrete. The shockwave shattered windows across neighboring districts. Then the final strike hit the main switchyard. In an instant, 2.6 gigawatts of electrical output vanished from Russia's western grid. More than 1.4 million residents across Voronezh, Lipetsk, and Kursk plunged into darkness. Traffic lights died, hospitals switched to emergency generators, communications flickered. The silence that followed was heavier than the explosions. By 3:44 a.m., the F-16s were already racing back toward Ukrainian airspace, leaving behind a burning complex, a crippled power network, and a stunned Russian command structure. In Kyiv's underground control room, a single encrypted message arrived. Objective complete, all aircraft returning. And just like that, 30 jets costing a fraction of Russia's defenses had rewritten the balance of power. If you want more deep battlefield analysis, remember to subscribe so you never miss the next breakdown.